So what I wanted to talk about here was balanced crankshafts. So what I wanted to know for my own information was, if I had the stroker crank, what does it weigh? What does the stock crank weigh? How much does the rod weigh? The ARC 4.410 inch rod. How much does the flat top stock piston weigh? And how much does the aftermarket replacement lightweight piston weigh? And I've already done this stuff, but I'll do it again just for you guys to see. So we'll start with the ARC rod. The ARC rod's pretty generic. So now, granted, these are 69 millimeter stroker cranks, and these are these over here are 92 millimeter pistons. Okay, one's the stock cast, one is the billet aluminum. So the stock rod, as you can see, I've got the bolts installed, the bearings installed, and we can weigh it, throw it on the scale here, and we get 269 grams. That coincides what I have written down on this paper here, so this is correct. When things repeat, it's always a good thing. So 269 grams. So the rod is going to be the same for each, whether we're checking the balance to see how things are balanced. The rod is, the same for either one. The weight of this works for each, balance ratio. So we can put that aside. We know the weight of the ARC rod, 269, and that's including bolts and wrist pins. Now, the piston. This is the stock piston. As you can see, it's got the wrist pin in it, and it has the rings on it. The two sealing rings and the oil ring. So we'll weigh this. This comes out to 304 grams. Sorry. Let's try that again. This comes out to 422 grams. So, without the wrist pin and just the piston and rings, we have 356 grams. The wrist pin weighs 67 grams. So 356 for the piston and 67 equals 422. Now for the billet piston. Now that doesn't have rings on it, so let me add the rings. We got the rings, we got the wrist pin, and we got the piston. The total of that is 382. So 382 total compared to 422 total. There's a 40 gram difference in total weight between the cast stock piston and the billet aftermarket lightweight piston. It's 40 grams lighter. Okay. So let me just leave that over there. Put the rings away. Alright. Now, the cranks. Let's weigh the cranks. We'll start with the stock crank. So the stock crank weighs 4,160 grams, which is the same that I have written down. So 4,161 grams. Let's go ahead and weigh the stroker crank. These are both stroker cranks, mind you. This one's balanced. This one has been drilled and has Mallory installed. Let's see what the difference is. This one weighs 4,273 grams. 73 grams. I have written down 4,272. This weighs 4,273 now, so 4,272, 73 grams. All right. So the difference between the balanced stroker crank and the unbalanced stroker crank is 112 grams. So there's 112 grams heavier balanced. Now, you do want that heavier, and let me show you why. If I move you over to here, where I have a very crude setup here for checking a balance. Now, this is just two, hold on, curtain rods that are just over my sink. This, like I said, very crude. So, we're not going to check the stock. We're going to go right for what I got. This is the balanced crank, and we'll just do this now without any piston on it or rod. And as you can see, it just falls right down to the heavy side. Okay, so now what this counterbalance is doing is trying to counteract the weight of the piston. Okay, so we need to add weight to this side to get this balanced. So what we're going to do is we're going to add the piston rod. Get that tightened on there good and tight. And as you can see, the piston rod alone isn't enough to counteract the weight. So what we'll do now is we will add the piston. Now let's see if that makes any difference. Now it seems as though the crank is too heavy on that side. But it's a lot better, as you can see. Almost wants to stay. It's not 100% balanced. It's almost as if it's still just a little bit heavy on the piston. And that piston doesn't have rings in it either. So that would be a little bit more weight. But I just wanted to show you, this is the balanced crank with the piston, the lightweight piston, and the ARC rod. This is, I gotta tell you, a lot better than you would see the crank out of the stock assembly. If you want to, I can show you that. Hold on. Let me just unbolt this. Take the wrist pin out of the piston. And I'll use the same ARC rod because that's probably the rod you're going to be using. But what I'll do is I'll use the stock cast piston and an unbalanced stroker crank, and we'll just see basically how far or how fast that falls. I know this was very close to being almost balanced. It stayed somewhat in the positions I had left it. So here is the unbalanced crank and the ARC rod. So the flywheel is that way. So the rod would be this way. Okay, just tighten these up. I want to make sure we get both bolts in because the bolts weigh, so those affect the balance. Everything metal affects the balance. All this weight affects the balance. So what we're gonna do now is this is tightened up. Okay, we'll go ahead and slide the cast piston back on. All right. Now let's see how this is balanced. Let's try to put it in a position, say here. Wow, that falls really fast. What about up here? It should probably stay somewhat like here, right? But nope. Still falls pretty fast. Even just off center. That's just off top dead center. Here's top dead center, so just off the top dead center, and boom. The other one, if I put it, say, like here, would stay. It wouldn't stay dead sideways, but if I put it anything above dead sideways, it would stay. Let's try this one completely straight up and down. Even then it fell. It found the way. So completely straight up and down. Still finds a way. Once you give it just a little nudge. So, what does that show you? That the lightweight piston and the balanced crankshaft, especially when you remove the balance shaft out of your engine, the lightweight piston, the balance shaft with the balanced crank is a much better feature, much better setup. I don't know if it's possible to get them 100% perfect. You know, there's so many variations in rods and pistons and stuff. I bet if you had it all at your house and were doing it yourself, you could probably get it right. But if they're not working with what you got, say if they don't have the rod that you're using there, or if they don't have the piston that you're using there, or the wrist pin or anything, it's going to be pretty hard to get that balanced without those. So just to review, I will hold this paper here. So the stroker crank, the stroker 69 millimeter weight was 4,160 grams. The balanced 69 millimeter stroker crank was 4,272 grams, which was 112 grams heavier. And the only reason that the piston's falling when you try to balance it like that is because the piston's heavier. So they're adding weight to the back of that crank. Now, even though you see here that they've drilled, now these are big holes. I mean, these are big holes. That they've drilled they've drilled out a lot of metal on this side. They've still got it heavier by adding this either Mallory or tungsten or very heavy metal to that side. So even the fact that they removed weight, so by them removing weight here and putting it there, this must have been out of balance, wanting to vibrate side to side. So this not only is adding more balance to your piston, but it's also probably a lot better balance from side to side from any of those vibrations. So the ARC rod that I was using was a 4.41 rod, and that was with the bolts and bearings. That weighed in at 269 grams. A lighter rod might actually help in this situation, but that's pretty much the smallest rod you can get. Unless the rod had a bigger cap for the back, like I think the bullfrog rod has it's a bigger rod. It might even have more weight in the cap, which might help. I did just order that rod. It's a 4.430, which is or 4.440. So it's 30 thousandths longer, puts my piston at 0 deck or close to it. So that is going to affect the balance a little bit, but we'll just weigh the rods then to see what's the difference. So the aftermarket 92 millimeter flat top piston with the rings and wrist pin is 382 grams total. And the lightweight flat top piston, that was the aftermarket lightweight, 382 total, and the stock was 424 total with the wrist pin and everything in the rings. So you can see how they're trying to go in the right direction. Lighter piston, lighter rod, heavier crank, trying to balance things out, because once you pull that counterbalance out of there, everything goes wonky. But I just wanted to put that information out there. I know I do a pretty bad job of making these videos and stuff, but let me see if I can. I know I do a pretty bad job of making these videos and stuff, and just wanted to put that information out there. Just moving forward, there's not really much information on the weight of these cranks, or really anybody weighing these things out or seeing what they're truly balanced out at on YouTube or anywhere like that. So hope that helps you guys, and please like the videos and subscribe.